What's up, everyone? Tim Anderson here, aka Renfail, and I'm back with the latest episode of Decoding Dune as we read through the Dune series. Well, specifically, we're reading through the Dune Trilogy, which is the first three books from Frank Herbert. You've got the Dune itself, you've got Dune Messiah, and Children of Dune. We started a few weeks ago, so we are on to the most recent chapter where we are meeting the Duke for the first time in this chapter. And in the last chapter, I was talking about how one of the coolest things I thought about that episode was not only are we seeing Dr. Yui's side of the equation and understanding his betrayal a little bit more, but also Paul thinking to himself how kind of sad he was that he hadn't been able to spend as much time with his father as before because of all the arrangements being made for Arrakis. So this, we get the sense that there is a good bond there between father and son, which I think is a very cool thing to have in this book. So without further ado, we're going to dive into the latest chapter. If you haven't already done so, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon as we continue on to read this. We do episodes every week, once a week on Thursdays, usually around 9 or 10 a.m. Central Time is when these go live. Let us dive in. As always, we start off with a quote from a book called The Muad'Dib Family Commentaries from the Princess Irulan. And it's literally talking about how do we approach a study of the Muad'Dib's father. And there's description here of Duke Leto Atreides, a man of surpassing warmth and surprising coldness. It's a very interesting way to look at someone. Two sides of the coin, as it were. On the outside, he needs to have the coldness of a ruling member of the is it the Landstrat? Is that what it's called? I can't remember now. But also on the inside with his family, being the warm family man that they need him to be. It says here, many facts open the way to the Duke. His abiding love for his Bene Gesserit lady, who he convinced to break the rules. The dreams he held for his son, to the aspirations he has for the fruit of his loins. And he said he also had a great devotion for the men that served him. You could see him there. I love the way that this is written. You see him there. A man snared by destiny, a lonely figure with his light dimmed behind the glory of his son. Still, one must ask, what is the son but an extension of the father? That's very deep. As someone who does not have a good relationship with their father, that's a interesting thing to think about. We're switching to Paul's POV here as he watches his father enter the training room. So the last, I think, 3 chapters, Paul's been in the training room and he's been meeting various people, his various mentors and tutors. But all these scenes have been taking place in the same training room over the course of a day, which is if you were reading these back to back, it would progress a little more naturally. But because I'm doing these on a week to week basis, it's like, man, he's been in this room forever. And it hasn't been, because especially like last week's chapter was very, very short. These are not long chapters, even though I'm doing them on a chapter by chapter weekly basis. Paul experiences a sense of presence from his father, also a very interesting way to describe the potency of the Duke. He carries with him a presence. He is someone who makes you pay attention to him simply because he's in the room. It's like natural charisma, so to speak. He's looking around the room here, asking Paul if he's hard at work. And I like how it says, as his gaze looks around, he says he felt tired, filled with the ache of not showing his fatigue because he can't show anyone that he's tired. And he thinks to himself, I have to use every opportunity available to me between now and the arrival at Arrakis, because after we get to Arrakis, I won't. I'm done. There's no more rest for me once we arrive on Arrakis. So he knows what lies ahead. This is the burden of duty that we talked about in the previous episodes. Paul's remembering the words of the Reverend Mother, the fact that for the Father, nothing. So even Paul, even if he doesn't understand it, he at least knows that the Reverend Mother and his own mother believe that the Duke will be coming to his end. And he even asks his father here, is Arrakis going to be as dangerous as everyone says? Perceptive question, but he does tell his son it will be dangerous. Paul says he's thinking to himself here, he's like, why can't I tell my father what the old woman said? How did she seal my tongue? So did the Reverend Mother literally put a spell oath on him, or is this just his consciousness letting him know that no, you shouldn't talk about this with your dad? Oh, we finally got the explanation for what the CHOAM or the COAM is. The Combine Hanet Ober Advancer Mercantiles. Oh, wow. He does manage to get this out. So this is really cool. So his father's explaining to him that one of the cool things about this is like you have to look at the pros and cons of this situation. And by gaining access to the directorship within COAM, it's a subtle gain for our family. Because COAM controls the spice, and Arrakis with its spice is their avenue to get their directorship to advance the family name. And then Paul manages to blurt out the question, "Did the Reverend Mother warn you?" And he thinks to himself the effort it had taken to ask that question. So he's definitely got some sort of compulsion on him with the voice that the Reverend Mother used on him. So the Duke is telling him, "Don't let a woman's fears cloud your mind. No woman wants her loved ones endangered. Your mother was the one behind all of these warnings, so take that as a sign of her love for us." And Paul starts to question, does she know about the Fremen? And he's like, yes, and a lot more besides that. And he wants to know what, Dad? And his dad thinks to himself, the Duke thinks to himself, the truth could be far worse than he imagines. But even dangerous facts are valuable if you've been trained to deal with them. And this is cool. So he's recognizing that his son has the training to handle the truth. And he lays it out for him. Few things escape the COAM touch. Imagine what would happen if something should reduce spice production. Oh, that's a very good question. Whoever had stockpiled it could make a killing, says Paul. Ha ha ha. The Duke thinks to himself, my son really has become educated on the observations and about the Harkonnens, the fact that they've been stockpiling for more than 20 years. So he's laying it all out for his son, and now Paul's understanding. He's like, oh, I get what. So this is what you're walking into, Dad. What we're walking into as a family. This is what awaits us on Arrakis. So his dad's not holding anything back from him. He's telling them the whole thing about how the Harkonnens want the Atreides name to become unpopular. Why are we walking into this? He asks the Duke, and the Duke says, knowing where the trap is, that's the first step in evading it, which has been in, I think, every film adaptation they've ever done that line. Next step of this is, of course, identifying all of the families who are stockpiling spice because they're in on it. Deeper into the line of thinking, once they realize, and Paul understands that the Emperor is involved in this, he surmises that that means the Sardaukar are also going to be involved. And the Duke responds to this with a positive affirmation of yes, and also disguised in Harkonnen livery, no doubt. There's a great discussion here about who the Sardaukar are as well. Basically, terrifying super soldiers. Just, trained in a hellish environment that makes them far superior to any other soldiers. What's up, everybody? Commercial break here. I got to give a shout out to our guild champions. It's the highest tier membership here on YouTube. We got Ancient Entity, Crazy as Relative, and Remy D. Thanks so much for your support. And of course, to all of the members here on YouTube, thanks for keeping me on the air full time. If you do like what you see and hear on my channel, don't forget to not only like, subscribe, and hit that bell icon, but please support. Consider me your Netflix, your Hulu, your Disney Plus, or HBO, whatever you want to call it. You can do memberships here on the channel, starting at $3 a month. And of course, anytime you see me live or you watch a premiere, you can do super chats and stickers on those videos, and super thanks on any upload you see, which allows me to keep doing this full time and paying the bills. So from Chris and I and all of our rescue cats, we say thank you. Let's get back to the video at hand. Oh, but this is when the Duke says, consider Arrakis. What do you see when you get outside of the towns and the garrison villages? And Paul's like, oh my. So it's just as hellish as Salas Secundus, where the Sardaukar are raised. And Paul's eyes widen, and he's like, the Fremen. And this is where the Duke is sort of laying out his plan. Yes, exactly. And we need to get them on our sides because the Harkonnens considered the Fremen to be this, backwoods, backwater, you know, you know, for lack of a better words, they just viewed them as this inferior kind of working class that lived in mud huts and caves, and they didn't view them as people. But the Duke does. The Duke sees in them a populated group of people who can be powerful allies if they can win them over. And this is when Paul goes, "Oh, we're negotiating with the Fremen right now, aren't we?" And his dad's like, "Oh yeah, that's the mission that Duncan Idaho's on." And Paul's like, "Oh, so you sent Duncan the Moral and Gurney the Valorous?" And his dad replies, "You named them well." Wow, this is really cool. The explanation of the Highliners because he wants to know, Dad, is the guild ship going to be big? And he's like, actually, yes, they're all big, but we're going to be in a Highliner, which is really big. It's a long trip. Says its hold will tuck all of our frigates and transports into a tiny little corner, and we will only be seeing a small part of the ship's manifest. So his father's telling him that he has the mentat capabilities here, and something that he was discussing with his mother. He thinks about all the special training from Howitt and his mother, the mnemonics, focusing awareness, muscle control, sharpening of sensitivities, and it just suddenly clicked in his head as his dad says, you're going to be the Duke someday, and imagine how formidable a mentat Duke would be. He says, "Do you want to continue with your training, or do you need more time to decide?" He says, "No hesitation." His answer, "I'm ready, Dad." And the Duke murmurs to himself, "Formidable indeed." That's a cool way to end that chapter. So, um, we get this close moment between father and son where the Duke is sharing the burden of leadership with his son, sharing everything that he knows, saying, you've had the training, you can handle the truth. And the son, accepting it and being able to handle it. And, they've got different ways of looking at it, but ultimately it's the same truth. This is our reality now. Here's what we have to deal with. So, pretty cool though, and also a sign that, his father's been doing everything he can to help him be a formidable Duke because he knows that he won't be around forever to protect his son. So he's got to give him the best chances possible of survival. Um, Food for thought. Love this chapter. This has been my favorite chapter so far in the book in terms of character development because we're really getting a chance to see that Paul is a very mature individual for his age because of all the training, because of his mother, because of his father, because of all these things. And then look at all this great danger that they're going to. And also in the back of our mind, we know that something's bad going to happen to him, and we know that there's a traitor. We know who the traitor is, and we know all these things. We know the Harkonnens' plan. We know all of it. And yet we see this noble man and his son, and it's like, shit. It makes what's coming even harder to swallow because we know it's coming, and it's part of the narrative here. So can't wait for next week's episode. Like, subscribe, hit the bell icon. Everybody, see you then.